Today we're going to put the Grey Knight's army through its paces and see what it can do in a competitive environment. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the battlefield. Today we're looking at a 2000 point Grey Knights list, one that I've largely based on a similar build that's been seeing a decent amount of success in tournaments over the last couple of months. Even before the Space Marine Combat Doctrine nerf, a fair few players have had some decent success with very similar lists, among them being Lawrence Baker of Tabletop Tactics and Manny Chima of Glasshammer Gaming. But there have been other players using it as well. The lists largely revolve around using a couple of large units of paladins that you can absolutely stack with loads and loads of buffs from psychic powers, chaplain litanies, and stratagems. So without further ado, let's take a look at my version of the list. So this one is organised into 2 battalions, where we have 6 small strike squads, 2 big units of paladins, and a bunch of supporting HQ choices. The army can be very flexible depending on being Grey Knights. Anything could start in Deep Strike Reserve, in the Teleportarium, but typically both paladin blobs would generally start on the board. I would be thinking about keeping them fairly well protected, ideally out of line of sight if possible, but if not then thinking about using the Tide of Shadows for -1 to hit when they're in cover, and between that and their defensive stratagems they can be incredibly hard to shift for an opponent at any sort of range. The paladins also have access to Redoubtable Defense, which is a 2-point stratagem for a big unit, and this subtracts 1 from the damage characteristic of all weapons that target them, meaning that they're going to be incredibly annoying to remove from the tabletop between a 2+ save and cover, and that -1 damage buff. And you could also potentially use something like Transhuman Physiology on them if you really wanted them to suffer almost no damage at all in a turn. The paladin loadouts that I've chosen to go for are a 9-man and a 10-man squad. 10 men each would have been optimal, but I was struggling for points a little. The 9-man squad has 7 Hellbards, 2 Warding Staves and Storm Bolters. They have the Hammer Hand power and are quite a good target for Cybolt ammunition, to make all of those Storm Bolters super deadly for a turn. The other Paladin squad also has the addition of 4 Psy Cannons into the mix, and they have the Astral Aim psychic power, which can give the unit ignores line of sight and ignores cover. To back up these 2 very meaty squads of Paladins, we have a whole load of flexible buffing characters. First up we have Grandmaster Boulders, who will both give his normal captain rerolls and also is able to let fly with 3 psychic powers per turn. Warp Shaping being used to progress into another Tide of the Warp, potentially either the one to boost Smite or the Tide of Convergence for more power out of all those Psy Cannons and also Cybolt ammunition. He has Armoured Resilience, which is just spectacular when combined with Paladins, as this one forces opponents to subtract 1 from the wound roll when it's applied to the Paladin squad. So ideally he would cast this on a Paladin squad, and then we'd think about using one of the other characters to cast Gate on them, to jump them up the board to threaten the enemy, and have them be ludicrously survivable for a turn, so the enemy will have to expend all their resources to try and chew through the very resilient squad. Finally, he also has Empyrion Domination, which is just a spell to help him spam out a few more command points if he's not wanting to cast Smite or anything. Next we have Kaldor Draco himself, who is primarily there for the full rerolls to hit, as well as being an absolutely amazing fighting character all by himself. He's one of our characters who can cast Gate, and I've also given him Sanctuary, which could also be applied to the Paladin squad that were thinking about jumping up the board, again to make them even more survivable. Next up we have a Brother Captain, whose main role is to give us the 24-inch range on Rites of Banishment, should we need to have a whole bunch of smites going off. But he also packs Gate of Infinity as well, and is also a Warlord with First to the Fray. He's also the bearer of the Relic, which I haven't included on the list I'm afraid, and I chose to give him the Augurium Scrolls in this list. These are the one that allow you to get an extra hit on a 6 whenever you're attacking in close combat with the Nemesis Force weapon, which is quite a solid buff to all of those Paladin attacks should we be able to get him in range. I think I'd be flexible with a Brother Captain, either deploy him on the board to help out with smiting, should that be one of the best strategies for the matchup, or maybe just dropping him down in reserve with either the other Paladin squad, or perhaps just all of the strike squads. Next up we have a Chaplain who has the Invocation of Focus litany, as well as another copy of Astral Aim, should we need to apply it to the other Paladin squad. Invocation of Focus adds +1 AP to either Nemesis and Psy weapons, so again we'll be trying to cast this on the Paladin squad that we're just about to jump up the board, to make their Storm Bolters, Psy Cannons or Nemesis Force weapons extra painful for the rest of the turn. Finally, we also have an Apothecary who has Sanctuary, again helpful to have around to improve the invul save of various units, but also because he can put some of the Terminators back together and just make them a real nightmare to remove from the board if you're potentially getting Paladins back each turn. And if he's got nothing better to do, he can also add to the weight of Smites. He's also not so bad in close combat himself if it gets to it. Finally, to round out the list and fill out the troops choices for the 2 battalions, we have 6 minimum size strike squads, all armed with halbards and storm bolters, and 3 of them also have a side cannon because I had some points left over. A bunch of them have Vortex of Doom, as they'll be good ones to position this power next to a key enemy unit. It's certainly not guaranteed to go off with Warp Charge of 8, but with a command reroll there might be a chance of it happening. And if it does, then you potentially get to throw mortal wounds all over the place. So the main strategy with how this list works is usually to jump a Paladin squad up into the midfield turn 1, after applying a bunch of durability buffs, and then lit rip with some Cybolt storm bolters or side cannons and things. Turn 2, do a mass strike squad drop and potentially gate the other unit of Paladins about as well, and probably then go into either the Tide of Convergence or Tide of Better Smites to do some horrendous damage to the enemy. Lists like this and fairly similar have proved themselves to be pretty strong in a tournament meta, able to go toe-to-toe with Space Marines and still win. It does have a decent amount of answers to a lot of key enemy threats, including loads of Storm Bolters for hordes, a ton of Smite and decent close combats for more elite armies, durable units, and very decent melee as well. I think it'd struggle most against armies that have very good board control, limiting where you can drop, and you might have to think about starting even more units on the board if your opponent's really going to go up the entire midfield with tons of bodies and tons of units. Armies with very good mobility might also be a bit of an issue if you have flyers and fast movers and deep strikers jumping all over the board, potentially trying to get to your characters and put decent hurt on your strike squads once they come in, then that could also lead to a bit of a bad time. Either way though, I'm glad that Grey Knights are seeing some more success on the tournament field these days, and I do think that this is a very strong list. In terms of some other variants out of the various ones that I've seen online, a lot of people like to run a Librarian in these lists, which would be quite good as he can bear the Sanctic Shard relic and potentially get +1 to his casts and reroll the results, which is very reliable for things that you absolutely need to go off, like that gate power and maybe warp shaping on the right turn. You could also field fewer strike squads and focus more on the characters and really tool up those paladin units even more, maybe adding in some things like demon hammers, although this wouldn't help as much with command points. You could potentially also think about replacing Draco with more bodies. His full rerolls are nice, but you can get some equivalents with psychic powers and the stratagem that gives a paladin squad +1 to hit for a turn, so it's certainly a nice to have but isn't essential. Let me know your thoughts on the list, or if there's anything that you'd change or improve yourself, or particularly if you've had any experience running anything similar at an event recently. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, as we have new 40k content coming out every single day, including fairly regular stuff for Grey Knights. If you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon page, which is what allows me to actually focus on making these videos as a bit more of a full-time thing rather than just in weekends and evenings. So any support that you can spare is greatly appreciated, and of course a big thank you to my current supporters. In any case, thank you very much for listening. I'll hope to see you guys next time.